policy do the same? Over 20 years of our Women's Federation projects and peace conferences for women and peace in the Middle East, I've heard so many stories from women leaders about how their children or relatives or friends have been radicalized. But I've also heard that due to the brothers and sisters and friends reporting to their parents about their fears, some of them could be turned around, and every life mattered. Every life matters. Some of these women learned, and they went on to spontaneously create prevention networks, reporting among themselves, and later governments joined them. The stereotype of terrorist as a foreigner from a disadvantaged, distant country that has no connection to my life has faded. The breaking news stories of the 3 teenage girls from Bethnal Green, England, who dropped out of university to fill positions as brides of ISIS fighters shocked all of us. According to Oxford University, social networks rank high in the process of radicalization, but friends or peers play the primary role in the recruitment of 3/4 of the foreign fighters to ISIS. We need to keep our children close and continue talking to them. Those decisions to radicalize were not made quickly, but began with disappointment, insecurity, confusion, and that came into the contact with wrong elements. How many more young women in our midst might be in the process of coming to such conclusions? There is no single cause and no simple solution. That is why we, all concerned elements, have to sit and talk together. Why are the promises of ISIS leaders able to take root in the minds of our European youth? Natural qualities of youth are hope, passion, expectation, and vulnerability. Some of our youth have become frustrated in their attempts to lead meaningful and even exciting lives. If we really do consider ourselves as a European family, committed to working together for peace and prosperity, as I saw on the EU homepage, we can find solutions, because families do that. They don't give up, and they don't leave anyone behind. The telling quote from a Disney animated film, Lilo and Stitch, in case any of you know, has taken on a new dimension since it was recently quoted in the preamble for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, leaving no one behind. Women's Federation has been involved in the discussions leading up to the declaration of the 2030 Development Agenda. There is so much hope, and yet there are so many possibilities for our youth to contribute to a brighter future. Youth do not want to be mediocre. They want to dream big and find realistic ways to make those dreams come true, just as those jihadi leaders seem to understand very well. I just came back from a UN conference in Korea titled Educating for Global Citizenship, Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals Together. Over half of the 500 participants were under 30 years old. We, Women's Federation, brought over 40 young women to participate. What creative and brilliant ideas were passed around, each one better than the next, and especially as they stimulated one another in a positive direction. How transformed are their lives to find themselves involved in platforms and negotiations that hope to change a brighter future for our whole planet. One couldn't imagine a better, larger dream. Right, Yana? She was there. For months in advance, and still now, the mails and links are being sent around among those youth focused on the 5 keywords of that agenda: people, planet, peace, prosperity, and partnership. Discussion groups focused on ending poverty and hunger, reducing inequalities, promoting decent work, ensuring quality education, making inclusive and safe communities, and empowering youth. Our failures in exactly these areas are part of the reason for radicalization. Should we not ask the youth to help us find solutions? How can we mobilize and build communities around these shared values? There are youth in most nations already offering their ideas to this campaign through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Can we not find a way to guide our searching youth to those websites instead? Can we not engage our youth to find more creative, more attractive, and positive programs? That is just what young Ahmed, 15 years old, told me when I interviewed him just last week at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. He is born in England to Iraqi parents. He and his cousin Yara were invited as panelists in a debate during the Human Rights Council on the dangers of ISIS in Iraq. Because of their project, hashtag no to ISIS, they were invited because of that project that they created. Both are convinced that if forewarned about the lies of the radicalizing indoctrinations and provided with alternative lifestyles, the promise of ISIS would not be so attractive, even to the disenfranchised youth. At the end of the interview, I asked Ahmed why he was not attracted to ISIS. He said that he was raised in a family where his parents stayed involved in his life, providing a good education also. He saw an example of authority and leadership in his parents and would compare that to other authority alternatives. But, he ended, not everyone has those opportunities, and that is why I am doing what I am doing. We have to look at our education systems, formal and informal. The UN and governments and we speak of quality education, but we may not all agree on that definition. Education at home should lead to public education, and that to reinforce education at home. We must agree not only on academic choices, but also the core values that remain the pillars we hope that our youth will adhere to. The professionals who guide our youth during school hours must also be accountable to those primary nurturers and experts in local knowledge, the parents. Both parents and teachers should strive to be good models, not just imparters of knowledge. Otherwise, it's very confusing for our youth. As we see here today, the United Nations, government, NGOs, religious leaders, academia, educators, everyone is trying. We want to include the role and voices of women, especially mothers, in this discussion, because they have proven their commitment and their effectiveness. Underappreciated for their local expertise in such a forum, and they may benefit from training. One of our tenets at Women's Federation is the role of women in leadership is crucial, not just because we are over 50% of the population, but because the primordial role of women as mothers in the natural family is the microcosm of the human family. Our Europe is at a crossroads, seeking to balance individual and collective needs, our need for interdependence without losing our sense of independence. Yesterday's Brexit debates highlighted that issue. We are being confronted with demands to open wide our doors, to share our home and our privileges. The founding principles of our union, as well as our personal convictions, make us want to be generous, but we find our capacities overwhelmed. Looming are serious concerns related to successful integration of our increasingly multicultural societies. If well done, the benefits all around will be great, but if not, the sense of exclusion and dissatisfaction will again be a breeding ground for more serious concerns. Governments alone cannot solve these issues, and that is why we're meeting here today. Our concern and our engagement has to begin in civil society, within each family. Radicalization or any disengagement from social and civic participation happens over time and is preventable in its early stages. But are we feeling responsible outside of our small network, our family, our community? We can only imagine what positive impact that same radicalized individual might have had in society. if these energies were funneled constructively. The underlying desire of our youth is to be relevant, to make a difference. Our religious and cultural influences and the authorities representing them also have an important responsibility to provide a vision and model for peaceful, cohesive communities. Similarly, our educational systems and the curricula that frame them will play a significant role in providing incentive for good citizenship and wise governance. How can we decide together and work together toward a vision of healthy, inclusive families and communities where truly no one is left behind? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for this wonderful content. So we don't want to leave anybody behind, so we are trying to be basically one family. At least we try. So now we are coming to our next speaker. Mrs. Dr. Solombo, beside me. She has served since August 2014 as officer in charge of the Implementation Support Section 1 of 3 geographic sections of the Terrorist Prevention Branch of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. Previously, Mrs. Solombo was a manager of the Assistance Program in Asia and Europe. She provided advice on the implementation of the Universal Instrument against Terrorism. She has served with the UN in Vienna and New York for almost 20 years. She obtained master degrees from Princeton University and the Moscow State Institute of International Relations. So, please welcome Mrs. Solombo.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Ms. Varda. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, first of all, our host, Mr. Zananato. Yes, I have memorized by now, Flavia Zananato, Honorable Parliamentarian. Thank you for having all of us here. And thank you, the Women's Federation for World Peace, for inviting our office, for inviting me to be present here. Although I have already participated in a number of events with the participation of civil society, still it is quite a relatively new undertaking for us, for an office like mine, to be present in such an audience. Thank you for inviting us, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here. It's a high toll, actually, to take over from a wonderful speech by Ms. Hunchin, and I already feel a bit amateur, at least in one aspect, as a mother, because I'm not sure whether anyone can compete with her achievements as a mother of 7 children. I can claim to be a mother of only 3 daughters, of a wonderful 3 young women about whom I'm very, very proud. And but of course it is a high toll to raise 7 kids rather than only 3. And I'm pleased, of course, to also highlight this in our discussions, the role of women and mothers from a different perspective, which is quite different from the type of work, in fact, I do in my job. I felt in my little intervention, to say a few words about my office. What we do, because it may not be necessarily obvious to you what is our role, and secondly, focus more on the youth issues, because we have done, at least in our office, something related. And finally, probably share with you some points from my personal experience and work, and I already apologize to dear friends who are trying to translate and interpret whatever I'm saying, because in that last part I will be a bit diverting from my written script. Now, it is actually very, very timely that we are discussing countering violent extremism and preventing radicalization in the counterterrorism context. Right now in New York, there are discussions at the General Assembly on the United Nations strategy on counterterrorism. It was adopted 10 years ago, so on the occasion of the 10-year anniversary of this very, very important document, overarching, the most broad and adopted by consensus document by all member states, after 10 years, member states, representatives of governments thinking, actually, what has been achieved so far? Have we actually progressed? Because the developments in the world actually show we're not getting any feeling, not getting it all safer or secure after this 10 years since the adoption of the Global Counterterrorism Strategy. What are the areas that we have to work on? And one of the actually probably unanimous areas is the Pillar 2 of this counterterrorism strategy, which talks about conditions conducive to the spread of terrorism. This is probably the area to which a new focus of the work of counterterrorism community falls in. It is in preventing violent extremism and preventing radicalization. United Nations Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon came up with a plan of action on preventing violent extremism at the end of last year, and then it was unveiled in the beginning of this year. It contains a number of very important initiatives, and this initiative is actually being currently discussed as well in New York in the context of important new steps to be undertaken by the global community in the United Nations level. And of course, you can always go ahead and have a look at this very important document. It is widely available on the internet. From the United Nations Office on Drugs point of view, we are headquartered in Vienna, in Austria, but we do have field offices. We welcome the Secretary General's plan of action on preventing violent extremism, which provides timely and much needed policy level guidance to UN member states, as well as UN entities working in related fields. Given heavy focus in the plan of action on the fundamental importance of the rule of law and human rights, both as a basis for preventing or addressing some conditions conducive to violent extremism, and as a means of addressing the lack of accountability and impunity of individuals or groups committing related crime, UNODC is well-positioned and stands ready to play a key role in implementing these aspects of the plan of action. In our office in UNODC, we have done extensive work on the issue of preventing violent extremism from a criminal justice and the rule of law perspective. As our name stands, as it's quite clear, we are in the work related to preventing transnational crime and helping developing criminal justice systems globally. We're already implementing several projects in preventing violent extremism area, including on issues related to supporting victims of terrorism. Victims of terrorism actually can be a very, very strong advocates and helpers in preventing violent extremism. And in fact, one of the projects which are run by the section which I'm leading, in our section we focus geographically on countries in Asia and Southeast Europe. We are working together with victims associations in putting forward a message of preventing radicalization, of importance of countering terrorist messaging and spreading further against the spreading the voice of terrorists. Treatment, another area of work is treatment of children recruited or associated with terrorist groups. I will tell you about an example later on. On countering radicalization in prisons. Working in prison reform is a very traditional area of our work. However, a new demand has arisen in later periods. How do we actually prevent radicalization in prisons? Because the word of terrorists and violent extremists is spreading very widely in the prison context. How do we manage these situations much better? Just especially vulnerable young people and youth who probably ended up in prison for minor crimes, for minor thefts or minor violations, can easily get under the influence of hardened terrorists and come out of prisons committed terrorists or those who are strongly radicalized. And this is one of the area of work. Foreign terrorist fighters. Within the phenomenon, of course, why actually is anyone get engaged in as a foreign terrorist fighter? We do work closely on preventing radicalization. Human rights and counterterrorism. Of course, human rights is quite a common area of our work, and we do try to further promote human rights among those who deal with preventing terrorism. The plan of action highlights the importance of protecting the rights of children and youth vulnerable to the lure of violent extremist narratives. And we started actually a project in the area of protecting children and supporting children who've been associated with terrorist groups. In particular, it is concerns, of course, Boko Haram, which is somehow particularly targeting children. Now, since I'm reminding about limited time available, I think I would move on, probably sharing some of my personal insights, and I would like to highlight these are not your views, but based on my personal experiences. What is to say what could be actually women's organization and civil society perhaps can pay attention to. First is, of course, I think it is it's good to remember that terrorism and violent extremism are global phenomena. It's very, very difficult to isolate yourself from global trends, to deal with issues as one individual country or even one region. The problems of the global world are spilling over. And addressing probably the hotbeds of different situations, security concerns, and global problems, whatever they are, is perhaps much more effective than trying to deal with the spillover effects of these problems. And second, that related to that issue, is important to perhaps information exchange in the context of preventing terrorism. Second, I think I would like to give example of a woman leader of women's NGO in one of the countries, how she actually was critical in that particular context. Again, I will give example of foreign terrorist fighters phenomenon. That she is Roma comes from a small community and a small town where a number of young people actually have gone and joined terrorist groups abroad. But if you ask actually local police, none of them had any facts or even number of who are these people. And the only information and data and statistics came from that women's NGO and which she's leading, because she knew everybody in her community, every family in that community, and she could actually tell who are these young people, who are, and how many of them, from which families, and why they gone to join terrorist groups. So we need some basic information, and the experience of women and the civil society groups in the community is extremely important. My second experience example comes from communication with a woman who is a religious leader. and a Muslim religious leader, and she highlighted how important actually religious leaders in many, many communities. And if we have actually more women who are religious leaders, we can have a lot of impact on large groups of societies, and including in preventing radicalization. And finally, this experience comes from my own experiences in conducting many, many trainings and at least in 50 countries in Asia and in Southeast Europe. It's quite common for me, it has been quite common for me trying to conduct courses and education training capacity building programs in the audience of all male audience. These are usually law enforcement officials, sometimes prosecutors, but primarily these are counterterrorism security officials. These are in the groups of 30, 14, all male audiences. In my many years, nearly over 10 years of experience of conducting various training courses in these countries, I've encountered only one young woman who was an investigator in counterterrorism team, and she was planning actually to leave because the work was too demanding. And of course, I'm not talking about the European or North American context there, but in the context of developing countries. Nevertheless, I think it's very, very important, to encourage our young women to join the counterterrorism authorities, security bodies, and of course help them perhaps to raise in the ranks. The presence of high-ranking women officials in counterterrorism field could be very, very instrumental in preventing violent extremism and radicalization. Thank you very much for your
time. Thank you for your message. So now I would like to introduce another lady, but she's not here, so I will not, but still I would like to introduce her. She's supposed to come from Paris because we wanted to have someone from France. But unfortunately, she was asked to go to Georgia, and so she could not be with us today, and in time with us today, which would have been very difficult for her to travel here. So, but I printed a text in French and in English. You can still have it here in the entrance of the room. You can get it. It's a very good text. I just want to share about her a little bit. This lady, Mrs. Bouchra Boulbelil, she's an associate researcher at the Institute for Prospect and Security in Europe. She holds master degrees in law and political science from Sorbonne University in Paris, and has worked on transnational conflicts in the Middle East and North Africa. She's currently preparing a doctorate thesis on women, gender, and Islamic organizations. So she made a very interesting written presentation. I spoke with her in Paris, and she was interesting about why the women are engaging themselves in the jihad. She studied about the engagement of women in jihad. So because it's less studied, we study more about, women are victims, or they are victims more, but not the other way. So we are talking more also the other way. So you can read just to tell you the main titles of her presentation is just to give you some insight of her expertise. Can women participate in political violence? In French, la femme peut-elle participer à la violence politique? Jihad, does it have a gender? The jihad a-t-il un genre? There's the title of our presentation. So please, you can get it over there, in English or in French, but it's very interesting expertise. Women, a reserve army, les femmes, une armée de réserve. The role of the jihadist woman, the role de la femme djihadiste. What benefit for the group? Quel avantage pour le groupe? Mobilisation of resource, differential propaganda. Mobilisation, la mobilisation des ressources, une propagande différentielle. Donc, it is very interesting also to